All right. Another big time trade just happened. This time we have a big time three-team blockbuster between the Spurs, Bulls, and Kings. I'm not going to get into every single detail of this trade. Just know, biggest parts of it, Spurs end up with De'Aaron Fox, Kings end up with Zach LaVine, and the Bulls end up with some draft capital for the future, which is well expected because they need to be kicking off this rebuild as quickly as possible. And here they are now. First thing I'm going to start with is the Spurs. I think that's the piece about this trade that I'm the most interested in. I'll talk about the Kings in a second, but I'm very impressed with how well they managed their assets. They did not give up way too much to bring back De'Aaron Fox. Like, yes, of course, they did give some things up and there were some things sacrificed, but their core is still intact. They didn't have to give up Devin Vassell. They didn't have to give up Keldon Johnson, right? Chris Paul is still here. Stephon Castle is still here. They still have some very crucial draft picks that they've got here. Like, they didn't give up too much to make this De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama duo an actual thing, right? Like, they didn't have to throw the entire kitchen out. They still kept a lot of important pieces intact. You love seeing when teams are able to make these big time deals without sacrificing too much, right? So that's the first and most impressive part about all of this is San Antonio just doing an amazing job from an asset management standpoint. Really good sign as they are trying to get this franchise back on pace as an elite level playoff contender. And it's just a reminder about just how great and how well this franchise is run. It's been that way historically, and it still seems to be that way now. Has it been perfect last few years? No, right? Like, there are some issues with how they handle Kawhi Leonard and everything. But again, this is just a soft reminder about just how well the Spurs can make things happen. Did an amazing job at controlling assets in order to make this thing work. Now let's talk about the basketball fit, because I feel like a lot of times when these big time trades happen, we're so caught up in like the discussion about who got fleeced and who got robbed and who won the trade and who lost the trade and who got nothing out of it. We don't talk a lot about the basketball fit and the basketball side of things. I know I was a victim to that yesterday. Like, I made a video about the Luka trade, and I was talking about how shocked I was when the trade happened, that I really didn't get too much of the conversation about the basketball fit with Luka being on the Lakers and the fit between him and LeBron. So let's do that here with Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox. It's an amazing fit here, right? You have two really interesting dynamics going on. For one, you have this amazing floor stretching big man in Victor Wembanyama, who can score in a variety of ways. We've seen it this year. Loves to get his shot off from distance, whether it's right at the three-point line or deep beyond the three-point line. So what does that usually fit with? A point guard who can create gravity. De'Aaron Fox is one of the best players getting downhill in the entire league. Not just one of the best, but arguably the best at getting downhill right now in the entire league. Flat out. And you're pairing him alongside with a guy like Victor Wembanyama, who, as I said, loves floor space, really crafty with getting to his spots out of like pick and pop scenarios and things like that. Pairing them alongside is like a match made in absolute heaven. You want to create these efficient looks here for Victor Wembanyama? Get a point guard who can get downhill quickly. And that's what you can get in De'Aaron Fox. So if you thought that Wembanyama's scoring was easy when Trey Jones was on the floor, and then thought it was easier when Chris Paul was on the floor, it's going to be even more easy for him with De'Aaron Fox on the floor, with how explosive he is and how much pressure he puts on the rim. Just watch how that continues to open up that Spurs offense and just give Victor Wembanyama more really easy, efficient looks from downtown. Like, a Fox and Wemby two-man game is really scary when you think about it. Think how great that two-man game was between him and Domantas Sabonis, where they would run like these really quick early offense pistol actions and get into things very quickly. You can do something like this here with Wembanyama as well. The possibilities are endless. We're seeing today in the game that two-man game works. It can win you big time playoff series. It can get you deep into the postseason. There was a duo that did that a few years ago with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, where they were just killing teams with these two-man corner actions. When you have two offensively skilled players like this in Fox and Wembanyama, possibilities are endless. It's going to be very tough to stop these two when they get fully in rhythm and in tandem with each other, even if they're like not super meshed well this season. Watch this thing develop over the years and see just how dangerous it becomes. And I'm not saying Fox is like the best flat out playmaker in the NBA. I think right now he's around like 6 assists, but still just the way he plays and how he plays and how he attacks the game. It makes sense for a young big man who loves to dominate in pick and pop situations, quite like Victor Wembanyama. We've seen it. De'Aaron Fox works well with skilled, versatile centers, right? And Victor Wembanyama is, of course, a skilled, versatile center. Doesn't have the same skill set that Domantas Sabonis has as far as passing and everything like that. But again, you can make some similar things happen between these two. And on top of that, Wembanyama just has higher upside than Domantas Sabonis, right? Better shooter, way more quick from a scoring standpoint on the offensive end, better defensive player as well. So this is like the Domantas Sabonis, De'Aaron Fox 1-2 punch on drugs. Again, I know Wembanyama is a different player, but this is like an entirely different version of what we got from Fox and Sabonis in Sacramento, and I'm really, really excited to see it. And there's also this. The first question for the Spurs after getting Wembanyama and after being convinced that he is their future franchise guy, first question now is this. Who do we pair alongside with him, right? Who are going to be the pieces that we fill out this roster with to pair alongside with our franchise guy? You get a franchise guy. Your first question is, who are we going to put next to him to try to put him into a position to succeed? We don't want to wait too long because you don't want a situation where you have a guy here putting up these amazing numbers and he's just not able to get into the playoffs, right? You don't want that situation. The Spurs moved just at the right time to get another all-star caliber guy around De'Aaron Fox. Not sitting here and just letting him be great while this team just kind of sits and stays stagnant and doesn't really make any big moves on the market to bring another great veteran piece around him. They made a great move and a great investment by bringing in a guy like Fox, who himself was actually in that situation at a point in his career. De'Aaron Fox went a very, very long time, maybe till he was about like 24, 25-ish, till he started experiencing something like winning. Right. And so it's really good to see the Spurs not want to see Victor Wembanyama fall into that, where he's waiting too long to experience winning. You get a guy like Fox, you're trying to expedite that process of winning. You are putting another all-star caliber player around him. That was the biggest question, was who was going to be that next guy they try to build this thing around with Wemby. Like when they got Stephon Castle, I always knew Stephon Castle was a great player, but I didn't think Wemby and Stephon Castle, right? I didn't think that was going to be the duo for the future, and it still could be, right? Like you never know. Castle's having an amazing all rookie level season, still a great player with a ton of ridiculous upside, and he's been great this year. But from just when that trade or when that draft move happened, I wasn't thinking, yeah, this is going to be the duo that San Antonio is going to run with moving down the road, right? I thought there was going to be something else there. Maybe it was going to come in future drafts or whatever the case may be. But it's here in De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox is the veteran all-star piece you put around a guy like Victor Wembanyama, and now you're like, here's what we're going to try to build this thing around. Here's what we're going to try to win with, right? Every player, every great young player has reached that point where their team has to make that investment to get a second guy around him. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? Like I go and look at the Dallas Mavericks. Their first time was going out and getting Kristaps Porzingis. And obviously, like I said, that didn't really work, primarily because there were injury issues and just general fit issues. But those teams are going to try to make these early moves sometimes to ensure that their young stars, their young generational stars, guys they feel like are future franchise players, they're going to try to make those moves to help them experience winning early on, right? To help them buy in faith to the franchise and just get them that valuable experience. Because again, you don't want a young guy who's great just sitting here on the roster not experiencing winning, because it's tough to judge his performance come playoff time if he's not getting to the playoffs by the time he's like 25 or whatever the case may be. Again, that happens pretty frequently with certain guys across the association, where they're waiting from like 19 to maybe like 24, 25 to actually experience some winning. I don't think it's going to be a case here for Wembanyama. You bring in Fox, you're guaranteeing a playoff appearance, you're guaranteeing more wins. Fox is clutch. This is yet another guy you can help close out games with. The Spurs do have a little bit of a turnover issue right now, and Fox doesn't completely fix that, because right now he's averaging like 3 turnovers per game, and that's about top 15 in the NBA, top 15 worst in the NBA. But still, right, a competent player, reliable scorer, has had big playoff moments before in his limited playoff experience. This is a good move, right? Great move to show that you are committed to getting Wembanyama some winning experience early, and you're committed to getting him a star veteran presence around him early on in his career, so he's not sitting here and waiting for that moment to come. Over to the Kings. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like it's Zach LaVine is finally in a brand new environment. Do I think this moves the needle for them? I don't think so. They've been great under Doug Christie. That's not a question. One of the things they've been better at is their defense. You give up De'Aaron Fox, and now you have Zach LaVine. Does that make you any better defensively? I'm not sure. And I'm not saying Zach LaVine is a horrible defensive player. He's had great moments this season for sure. But I don't know if this adds to this defensive kind of trend, this upward trend you've had on the defensive end over like these last few weeks after Christie became the head coach. So there is that. Then you're kind of operating without a primary playmaker. And that's always extremely scary, especially when there's some repetitiveness there. Malik Monk and Zach LaVine are essentially the same player. Zach LaVine's better than Malik Monk, but in theory, they're the same player. And you don't really have that stomp down playmaker. You do have Sabonis, right, who you can kind of, have act as a playmaking hub here and there, but is that enough? Right? Is having a playmaking hub from the 5 spot, is that enough to totally fix your playmaking issues? We'll see, right? Like there are teams who have survived by having a 4 or 5 as their primary playmaker. Look at the Golden State Warriors when they were winning championships. Draymond Green really was their primary playmaker in the starting lineup. It'll be Curry as well, but Draymond Green did a pretty large load of that himself. You can also think about in some other situations, the Nuggets, where the best playmaker in the NBA is Nikola Jokic, and he's a 5 guy. So there are some situations where that does work. So we'll see what ends up happening. But I don't know if this makes them that much more of a threat on the defensive end. I don't know how much that disrupts that trend for them. It'll be interesting, right? Your perimeter right now is Malik Monk, Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, and Zach LaVine. Points are going to be put up. I think the offense is going to look pretty neat at times, but the defense stuff and like late game situation and figuring things out, that gets kind of weird when you don't have like a good true stomp down playmaking point guard. But again, that could be alleviated by the fact that you have Domantas Sabonis, who is a pretty good playmaker himself, especially from the top of the key. But we'll see what the limitations to that are. We'll see. But it's interesting, and I think they're still watchable, and it's once again Zach LaVine in a new environment. But is this an environment where I'm like, yeah, this is finally where I want to see that Zach LaVine at, right? Like, I don't think so. This isn't an environment where I'm like excited for LaVine. It's not like a new horizon sort of thing because you're going to another team, but I don't know how high the expectations are. This isn't LaVine going to a contender. This isn't LaVine going to like a Lakers, or this isn't LaVine going to like, I don't know, a Nuggets or whatever the case. I'm just throwing names out there, but that's not what this is. This is Zach LaVine kind of going to a bit of a question mark team, which we've seen before. Zach LaVine's always been on a question mark team his entire career. So I don't know where this puts Zach LaVine at. Again, I think this thing is going to be fun. I think they're going to string together some wins, but I don't know if this really moves the needle for a Sacramento Kings franchise that's been pretty mediocre since kind of exploding out of the gates in that 2023 season. So we'll see what happens. I'm not going to get into who I think won this trade or whatever the case may be, because when teams make trades, they each make trades for different reasons, right? And so you can't hold them to like the same standard across the board, right? Some teams make trades to expedite a rebuild. Some teams make trades to expedite their ability to contend for a title, right? So I'm not going to talk about who won this trade or whatever, but I'm really interested to see what this does here for the Spurs. I am very intrigued by the prospect of a De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama 1-2 punch. I think it's going to be very fun to watch. Again, we see how great Wembanyama is when he's put around amazing point guards, and they've done that, right? You start off with Trey Jones, you start off with Chris Paul the next, and you also start off with De'Aaron Fox. And we're also seeing this too. It never hurts to have multiple playmakers out there, right? Like, one thing about Chris Paul that's very, very unique is he can coexist with other scoring-minded guards out there on the floor, right? Like, he did it for one season with Curry, and that was in a pretty small volume. But remember what he did back in OKC. He was out there with Dennis Schroeder. He's out there with SGA. So you can make that work. So there's just so much versatility and so many possibilities here for the Spurs team. It'll be fun to watch the rest of this season, and it'll be fun to watch down the road, especially this duo of Fox and Victor Wembanyama. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what the early returns of this are. I'm not sure when Fox is going to be suiting up for the first time here for the Spurs, but it'll be interesting. And this was a very successful trade, I think, especially for the Spurs squad. Kings made out pretty solid. There are some question marks there, and we'll see what this does for the Bulls. I think they're going to continue to make some more moves down the road as they are rebuilding, and they should have been doing that a long time ago. So we'll see. But very interesting trade. Can't wait to see what the immediate returns on this thing are over like these next few months.